All right, Khan. Shalom. Before I begin, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach Kudash. I'd like to say double honors to my teachers, the apostles, and the elders of Great Millstone that rule well and teach well, the men whom I've learned this truth from, and also Shalom and salutations to the brothers out there of the hopeful elect that are preaching this word and truth and sincerity. All right, so I'm the brother Shaquat from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal. I'm back out here once again, with another lesson, and this lesson that I'm going to be getting into today is going to be a lesson going into something that's misunderstood, something that's a stronghold that's been pushed by, modern day Christianity, and modern day Christianity, that doctrine is false because, they don't teach the scriptures for what they are, right? They keep particular things back, and, overall, they've been blinded to see the scriptures for how they truly are, man. They've been, their understanding has been dulled to really tap into the power of the scriptures, right? But, the Lord has granted access to particular men to have that power in understanding the scriptures, man. Because not everybody can understand the scriptures. Not everybody can handle the scriptures, right? But that's for particular souls and spirits, man, to be able to contain 100% truth, right? And the scriptures also speak about vessels, man, broken vessels, right? Broken cisterns, meaning that there's particular spirits on the earth that are actually denied access to the truth, and even if they somehow manage to gain access to the truth, that's only gonna last for a little bit, man, because they're gonna break and shatter, right? But the point being is that the modern day Christianity, they have a complete, or focusing on the topic that at hand is, the concept of the Lord's mercy. They don't fully understand that, and that shows in their understanding of death, right? Because the way that the world and modern day Christianity has taught death, they teach it as a fear tactic, right? For you to fear death and be afraid to die, not understanding what happens when you die, man. And that's what I'm going to touch on in this lesson, Lord willing, right? So matter of fact, let me start here in the book of Psalms 119. And verse 64, it says, "The earth, O Yahweh, is full of thy mercy. Teach me thy statutes," right? So the earth as a whole is full of the mercy of Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, right? So we have to understand that the Lord is a merciful power, man. He's a merciful God, and some people try to basically belittle the Lord's mercy, man. But the Lord's mercy is heavy, like the scriptures say. I believe that's in the book of Sirach, roughly paraphrasing it. It mentions the long suffering and everlasting mercy of the Lord, man. And when you closely examine things, right, you're gonna come to find out that the Lord actually has mercy towards it, no matter how gruesome it may be, right? And one thing I'm going to focus on once again is the death, right? The Lord shows, or the Lord's mercy is shown in death, man. And that's with everybody, right? With every nation on the earth, you know? So let's go from there to the book of Job 3, and I'm going to start at verse 11, right? Because, you know, you have nations of people on the earth. There's 18 nations of people on the earth today. And out of those 18, one of them the Lord loves. And that one is the nation of Israel, right? The so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. That is the nation that the Lord has chosen to be near and dear unto himself, right? But guess what? There's a duality to that love. There's a nation also out of the 18 nations on the earth that the Lord hates and despises, you know? And that nation is the nation of Edom, the Edomites, right? The modern day or so-called white people. That's the nation whom the Lord hates, you know? But even though the Lord hates them, the Lord still shows mercy to them when they die. Because when they die, or when anybody dies, what happens is your spirit is at ease, man. Right? Contrary to what the Christian church teaches that if you've been wicked, your spirit is tormented in hell. That's not true. That's not according to the scriptures. Why? Because for one, a spirit cannot be tormented. And for two, there's no such place as hell. Right? That's mythology. You know? So this is Job 3 and verse 11. It says, "Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly?" Right? So what we're reading to set the stage is Job, you know, basically going into the fact that, or him wishing that he had died because of the affliction that he was going through. But this supplication of Job, you know, you might question, like, why does he want to die, man? Why does he want to give up the ghost? Why does he want to leave his current body that's being afflicted, you know? And that's going to be answered as we read on. It says, verse 12, "Why did the knees prevent me, or why the breast that I should suck? For I should have lain still and been quiet. I should have slept, then had I been at rest." So Job was saying, if I give up the ghost, right, he would have been at rest, right? Letting you know that when you die, it's a peaceful thing, you know? You no longer have to deal with particular ailments that you might have in the flesh or particular problems, man. Right? And that's for everybody, that every spirit that leaves their body. Verse 14, it says, "With kings and counselors of the earth, which built desolate places for themselves, or with princes that had gold, who filled their houses with silver, or as in hidden untimely birth, I had not been, as infants which never saw light." So Job is saying that all these people, kings and counselors of the earth, princes that have gold and lots of money, or even children that died in the womb, when they all died, they're at rest, right? They all go to the spirit world, to the Heavenly Father, you know, and they are at rest, right? So there is no such place as a place on the ground where you're tormented because you lived wickedly on the earth. You know, there's no place called hell. But guess what? The process of judgment is that, okay, you live out your judgment on the earth, right? You know, that's the reason why, we get sick. That's the reason why you might break a leg, you might, and so on and so forth, right? You might be blind, you might be crippled. That's because you're living out your judgment on the earth, right? Because what happens is when you die, your spirit goes up to the Heavenly Father to receive his judgment. Matter of fact, before I continue, let me get this real quick. Just to back up my point. Because scriptures say you got to prove all things, right? This is the book of Ecclesiastes. And verse 7, it says, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, right? And that dust is referring to your body, right? Your physical body, because it's made out of dust, right? Hence the saying, dust to dust, ashes to ashes, right? Going back to the ground. It says, so that's what happens when you die. Your body dissolves. What it goes on to say, and the spirit shall return unto the Most High who gave it, right? So the spirit that was in that body, that was fueling that body, that returns back to the Heavenly Father who gave it. That goes back before the throne of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, right? And is going to receive his judgment for the things that were done on the earth, right? So that's the process. Your flesh dissolves, your spirit returns up to the Most High, and then it receives his judgment, right? And scriptures also mention we shall all before the judgment seat of Hamashiach, Yahushai, roughly paraphrasing that precept, right? So let's go back to Job 3 and verse 17. It says, there the wicked cease from troubling, and there the weary be at rest. There the prisoners rest together, they hear not the voice of the oppressor. The small and great are there, and the servant is free from his master, man. So there's no form of torment at all after you die, no matter who you are, right? Verse 20, wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter soul, and life unto the bitter in soul, right? So that's pretty much the point, man. No matter who you are, you're comforted after you give up the ghost, right? But guess what? Your judgment, you live out that judgment once you come on the earth for however you lived on the earth, whether that was wickedly or righteously, So let's go from there to the book of Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 16. It says, and moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there, right? So under the earth, under the sun is the earth. So the earth would be the place of judgment. The earth is where we live out our judgment, once we're sent back to the earth, because reincarnation is biblical, right? Once, your flesh dissolves, your body dissolves, your spirit returns to the Most High. The Most High gives you the judgment, and you stay there for however long, however the Lord wants you to, be up there. But then you get sent back on the earth to live out your judgment that was given to you. And that judgment might be good or that judgment might be bad, But that's the reason why some people are blinded or so on and so forth, right? Because that's a part of the judgment, and they're living it out, for however they lived on the earth before, right? So with that, I hope this lesson was edifying. Call halal Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai Ba'ashem Chakadash. Once again, double honors to my teachers, the apostles, and the elders of Great Millstone. And shalom to the elect.